Space was quiet, so quiet that it felt heavy. The Star Moth, an old cargo ship, drifted in the empty space between the stars. At the controls sat Mara. Her hands, scarred from years of hard work, rested calmly on the panels. She was a cargo hauler, always traveling, always alone. Her face was weathered by the suns of distant worlds, and her eyes held the look of someone who had seen everything. But deep inside, the curiosity that had first sent her into the stars was still alive. A soft beep broke the silence. Unusual energy reading, the ship's computer said. Source unknown, distance 3 light minutes. Mara leaned forward. On the screen, among the sparkling jewels of an asteroid field, she saw something. A fragment. Not rock, but something built. A piece of a giant floating structure, broken and abandoned. It was unmistakable. The wreckage of a ship made by aliens. "Well, that is interesting," Mara whispered, steering the Star Moth closer. "Let us see what secret you are hiding." Docking was difficult. The wreckage turned slowly, and the old cargo ship groaned with every course correction. When the airlock locked into place with a heavy sound, Mara checked the seals on her spacesuit one more time. Who knew what kind of air was inside this wreck, if there was any at all? She stepped into a dark hallway. The light from her helmet lamp danced across walls made of a smooth, black material that swallowed every sound. The air was thin and cold, but breathable. Her footsteps sounded dull as she moved deeper into the heart of the destroyed ship. Every room she passed through was a silent sign of an advanced culture, but all were empty. Dead. Then she found the chamber. It was different. A single large crystal stood in its center. No frost, no sleep. The crystal pulsed with a soft golden light, and inside, trapped like an insect in amber, floated a figure. Mara held her breath. She stepped closer and wiped the fine dust from the crystal's surface. It was a being, a boy, no older than 8 or 9. His skin was a deep silver, and his head was surrounded by thin, glowing threads that looked like a crown of stardust. His eyes were closed, his face calm, almost peaceful. "Good heavens," Mara whispered. Her mind raced. Who was he? What had happened to his people? With trembling fingers, she activated her analysis tools. The boy's vital signs were stable, but the crystal that held him was losing power. Maybe in days, maybe in hours. And the energy would fail and turn him into dead stone forever. Mara closed her eyes. She was no rescuer. She was a loner who stayed away from anything that smelled like responsibility. But she could not leave him here to die. "All right, little one," she said softly. "Looks like you have a cargo hold now." The next hours were a blur of hard work. Mara had to cut the heavy crystal from its base with laser cutters and move it into her ship. As the wreck disappeared into the darkness, she felt the weight of her choice settle on her shoulders. She had no idea how to wake up a stone alien child. The crystal melted slowly in her small workshop. It was a slow process, and Mara paced around, moving between the monitors and the small couch where she had placed him. "What have I gotten myself into?" she muttered again and again. Then, as the last pieces of the crystal turned to light, he moved. His hand twitched. The thin threads around his head began to glow brighter, and then he opened his eyes. They were huge and deep gold, full of confusion and fear. Mara slowly raised her hand, a gesture of peace understood across the universe. "It is okay," she said gently. "You are safe." The boy stared at her. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. He tried to sit up, but his movements were weak and clumsy. Mara helped him, feeling how fragile he was under her touch. "Can you understand me?" she asked. He tilted his head, his golden eyes wide. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "Do you have a name?" she asked. The boy's face twisted, and he shook his head. Tears gathered in his big eyes, and Mara felt her heart make a painful jump. "Hey, it is okay," she comforted him. "Then we will call you Sul. That fits, right?" A hesitant smile appeared on his silver face. "Sol," he repeated, his voice clear as a bell. "Right, Sol. Mara said, helping him sit up on the couch. "I am Mara, and I think we are a team now." The first weeks were one big learning adventure. Mara searched the databases of her old ship for information about silver-skinned, glowing beings. She tried all kinds of food, found out that Sol liked to use the ship's solar panels as an energy source, and that he was scared of loud noises. Sol, for his part, was incredibly curious. His golden eyes followed Mara's every move, absorbing every word like a sponge. "Show me that," he asked one day in his melodic voice, pointing at the control panel. Mara, who was just planning her next cargo run, hesitated, but then she showed him. How to calculate jump points, how to adjust the engines. He understood everything immediately. As time passed, Mara realized that Sul was no ordinary child. One night, when a power failure plunged the star moth into darkness, she heard a strange humming sound. She found Sol in the workshop, his hands placed on a broken power distributor. The thin threads around his head glowed bright, and the distributor fixed itself. The wires grew back together. The crystals began to glow again. "What did you just do?" Mara whispered in awe. Sul looked at her, his eyes shining. "It was broken. I told it to heal, and it listened." Mara understood that Sul had a connection to technology that was beyond her imagination. It scared her, but it made her even more proud. They began to take small jobs, transporting medicine to remote outposts, fixing old machines on farms on distant moons. Mara hid Sol's abilities from the outside world, but in secret, he was her best engineer. He could understand any device, heal any system. With Sol on board, the Star Moth was faster and more reliable than ever before, but as Sol's 14th birthday approached, the questions came. "Mara," he asked one evening, as they traveled through the galaxy, "why do you avoid the big worlds? Why do we always stay in the outer regions?" Mara sighed. She knew this day would come. "It is complicated, Sul," she said. "Humans on the big worlds fear what they do not understand, and your abilities, they are very special. I want to protect you." Sul nodded, but Mara saw the longing in his golden eyes. She knew she could not hide him forever. He needed more than just her and the old corridors of her ship. Yeah. When Sul turned 16, his power was no longer a secret. He could not only heal machines but also speak to them. Once, when pirates attacked them, he simply whispered something, and the pirates' weapons shut down. Their ships floated helplessly in space. After that incident, Mara knew they had to make a choice. Sul did not want to run anymore. "I cannot hide my whole life," he said, his voice firm. "I must learn who I am, where my people are, and I cannot just watch the world go by through a window." Mara saw the determination in his eyes, so similar to her own. She knew it was time. "All right," she said, her voice rough. "Then we look for your past." They traveled to Nova Haven, an outpost on the edge of civilization, where questions were not often asked. The first days were good. Sul walked with wide eyes through the colorful markets, smelled the strange spices, and listened to the 100 different languages. But then came the men in black uniforms, the Galactic Security Authority. "We have reports of unauthorized technomancy," the leader said in a cold voice to Mara. "Hand over the boy. He is a threat to public safety." Mara stepped in front of Sul. "He is a child," she hissed. "He is a weapon," the man replied. They had to flee. A risky takeoff, chased by authority hunters. In the wide emptiness of space, hidden in a thick nebula, they found brief safety. But the authority had their trail. They would not give up. Then they met Jax, an old veteran with a cybernetic eye and an even older ship. He had watched their emergency landing on a moon. "You are looking for the Star Weavers," he said after looking at Sul for a long time. "The people with silver skin and glowing hair." Mara pulled her weapon. "How do you know that?" Jax raised his hands in peace. "Because I was one of their seekers before the authority declared them extinct. The Star Weavers were not destroyed. They hid. Deep in the galaxy's core, in a region no one can map, they fear the outside world." He looked at Sul. But maybe it is time they learned to stop being afraid. Together, they began the dangerous journey. Jax knew the old paths, the hidden jump gates. Mara piloted the star moth with all her skill. And Saul felt the connection. It was as if a voice in his head grew louder the closer they came. When they finally found the hiding place, a Dyson sphere around a dying star, they were not greeted by weapons. Instead, other beings like Saul floated toward them, old and young, with silver skin and glowing hair. But the authority ships had followed them. They had placed a tracker on Jax's ship. A whole fleet appeared, ready to destroy or capture the last secret of the Star Weavers. At that moment, Sul stepped forward. He floated between the authority fleet and his new family. He did not speak. He thought. A wave of pure information flowed from him, not as a weapon, but as a bridge. Every soldier, every officer in the authority ships suddenly felt what Sul felt. They felt the fear of a child who had lost his family. They felt the hope of his people for peace. They felt the emptiness of their mission. The weapons on the authority ships shut down by themselves, not through force, but because no soldier wanted to pull the trigger anymore. In the quiet that followed, an older Star Weaver, the Elder, came out of the sphere. She embraced Saul, tears in her eyes. "You have come home," she whispered. Sul nodded but turned to look at Mara, who still stood by the star moth, a lump in her throat. He floated toward her. "You gave me my first home," he said, his golden eyes shining. "But now I can show you and everyone else what kind of home we can all build together." In the months that followed, the Dyson sphere became a neutral place. The Star Weaver's technology, which could heal and connect machines, was used to link the authority worlds and the free worlds of the outer regions. Sul became a bridge builder, a peacemaker. Mara stayed. She stopped traveling. Her new place was at Sul's side, as an advisor, as a friend. Now one evening, they stood together on a platform of the sphere, looking at the dying star, which now glowed brighter than ever, fed by the energy of the people who protected it. "I always thought my life was over," Mara said quietly. "Old ship, old woman, alone in space." Sul placed his silver hand on hers. "Your life has just begun," he said, and smiled. And as they looked into the endless expanse of space, Mara knew he was right. The greatest adventure was not behind them. It was right in front of them,